start this now. We seem to be having a couple technical difficulties with Helene joining us, but we'll be on shortly. Okay, so although it looks like for whatever reason the system doesn't want to let Helene in, so I suppose I'll just start this on my own in just a moment. Okay, well, it looks like it's just me talking right now. So welcome to the third week of our Wikipedia seminar. Okay, so today there were a few things I wanted to talk about. For some reason the system isn't letting Helene in, so it's just me today. And I hope things are going well with your work, with your editing so far. So a couple of things I wanted to talk about today. The first thing I wanted to talk about was how do you move your sandbox article into main space? So by now you have probably been working on an article for a while. You may have been doing it in a sandbox. So what next? How does it go public? How does it get there into the public view? First question always is, how do you know when you're ready for main space? Now, there's nothing in policy that forbids the creation of very short stubs. If you want to write a single line with no real, if you want to write a single line message with a single line article with no real information, you're okay to do that. But the reality is it's probably not going to last very long on Wikipedia. Once upon a time, if you look at an article's history, you might find it's starting out as a very short stub. But in the last 14 years, the community norms have changed, even while the policy may not. If you start with a very short stub, you'll probably end up with something that's very heavily tagged and quite possibly nominated for speedy deletion within a few minutes of their creation. So while it's possible to keep writing around these tags, it can be annoying to have to deal with that. If you want to start something in main space, my recommendation is anything that's newly posted into main space should include at least one substantial paragraph of well-referenced information. Ideally, you should have a references section with at least one incoming link from another article. You should have at least one category added to the article, And info boxes should be included if they're appropriate. These things aren't absolutely required. What really matters is writing well-referenced content, but there's something that new page patrollers are likely to notice. And if they're there, they're more likely to assume that you know what you're doing. Like the famous example of Ford Prefect's recommendation why you should always have a blanket in the Hitchhiker's Guide. But that doesn't really answer the question, when should you really move your draft into main space? First thing to think about is if you're moving something into main space, is it up to standard? Does it meet the quality standard that you feel it should have? Are you ready to relinquish ownership of the article? Wikipedia articles, by definition, aren't owned by anyone. Anyone can create one, anyone can edit it, but even if you create an article, you develop it, you even shepherd it through the good article or the featured article process, you still don't own it. Everything in Wikipedia can be edited by everyone. Now, by convention, certain areas you're allowed a lot more leeway in. For example, when you're working in a sandbox, convention is that other people will let you do what you want to do without bugging you too much, so long as you stay within policy. You can't create a sandbox that's going to be used to attack people. You can't post copyright violations in a sandbox, but within reason, you can write as good or as bad an article in a sandbox, and people will generally leave you alone there. But as soon as you move something into main space, you're working in public, you're in the world where, by convention, anyone can and quite possibly will make modifications, make additions, these kinds of things. If you don't feel ready to share in the development process, if you don't feel it's mature enough for that, that's one reason not to move it into main space. Another reason might be that you're interested in nominating the article for Did You Know? So Did You Know is a process for new articles where a little fact from the article is posted on the front page. And it's it gets the article a lot of page views. Now, to be eligible for Did You Know, your article needs to be newly created or newly moved into main space. That's new meaning within the last week. And it has to be at least 15 characters of readable prose. So that means that it has to have at least 1,500 characters in text, not tables, info boxes, lists, these kinds of things. So if you've created a draft that's just a little short of that, but you think that that you will soon bring it up to that level, you might want to hold off until you can get it over the bar so that it's new enough. Now, the DYK process can be a little daunting, although it shouldn't be for anybody who has had to meet a word limit for an abstract submission. It's basically about getting one interesting fact into the required length, and it's fairly short, the number of words you can use. And you submit it. It's a good way to get some eyes on your work. Somebody will review it, will make sure that the fact that you're stating is supported by the citations, things like that. It is actually a good way to get some eyes on your work, but it's not a way to get feedback. So if you have something that's obviously incomplete, don't submit it to DYK and ask people to take a look at it. you'll just annoy people. If you have something that's reasonably polished, though, and you think it might be a good hook for DYK, submit it, and you will get some eyes on it. So now there's the question of how do you actually move something into main space? And I'm going to share my screen here in a moment. Let's see. Screen share is never my friend, it seems. Okay, so if you're going to be moving something into main space, what you want to do is you want to move a page. Now, I have a little sandbox here. This is my automatically created sandbox. And let's say I was ready to move this into main space. Well, what I would do first is get rid of this sandbox template because it's no longer a sandbox. Save that. And although I would never move this in reality, if you look up here, there's a little tab that says More. Click on that, and this brings you to the Move screen. Now, the Move screen has some important information here. It's telling you you're going to be moving it. First thing you want to do is look at the namespace. So right now it's in the user space. It's a sandbox of mine, and I want to move it into the article space. The article space is up here. It's the first option. We don't want to move it into the Wikipedia space. Students sometimes make the mistake of thinking that the Wikipedia space is Wikipedia. This is not where we want to go. We want to go to the article space. Okay, sorry, just a moment of distraction. I'm completely messing up now. Let me just stop this for a second. Okay, sorry about that. I'm trying to multitask unsuccessfully. So here we are. You want to move it into the article space. You want to give it a name that's meaningful. So something, and you want to explain your rationale for moving it. And then you just click on Move Page, and you have moved your page into a main space. That is the standard way of doing it. It's fairly easy, and as long as you're sure that your article is up to standard, it's the best way to go. Now, another alternative, which I don't recommend, is to use the article for creation process. So the idea here, let's go back to this, is to click on this submit your draft for submission, submit your draft for review button, and that brings it into the AFC process. I don't recommend it because, for one, there's a backlog of several months. So articles can languish for a long time. This can languish well beyond the end of a class. And the end result is that you have, by the time somebody reviews the article, says, well, you need to make these changes before I can accept it, the student is long gone, and the changes never get made, the article never gets approved. And after 6 months of sitting there unapproved, AFC submissions are normally deleted. So the downside of that is often nothing happens. Much better with classes would be to ask the content expert to take a look at it, or better yet, if it's your class and your students, review their drafts yourself, see that it seems to be up to standard for you, and if it seems reasonable, go ahead and approve it. So hold on a moment. Sorry. Okay, so moving on here. The other thing I wanted to talk about was, or the other thing we wanted to talk about this week was getting feedback. So we talked last week a little bit about getting feedback, a couple places you could get feedback. And I would recommend the first place to look is the notice boards. So when you sorry about these breaks. I'm still trying to sort out what's going on, and unfortunately, I don't have the expertise when it comes to Google Hangouts to solve the problems. Okay, so getting help. Where are you going to get feedback? Last week we mentioned a couple places that were good. The Tea House was one good place. When you've and another place would be the Wiki project. In this case, probably Wiki project psychology. Talk page of the article you're working on. Another good place to get feedback, to get responses from people. The problem with these is, other than the Tea House, none of these are places that you're guaranteed to engage with anyone. The Tea House, you're going to engage with someone will respond, but they may know very little or nothing about the content area. The Wiki project is not the most active, so you may or may not get feedback there. The talk page, again, the article talk page, assuming you're not creating a new article, is maybe a great place to get feedback, but again, it may be some place where nobody has much to say. but you can always hope for the best. Now, sometimes though you have problems or you have questions that are not content specific, but they're topic specific. So let's say you have a media copyright problem. Let's say there's somebody else on the editing the article who's using it to promote their company. You have somebody who you think is being unacceptably rude, something like that. Where can you go to help? Okay, where can you go for help? And the best place for this is Wikipedia's large collection of notice boards. There's a page here, Wikipedia notice board, and you'll notice here these little shortcuts. These are always useful to look for. So the notice board page is basically about notice boards. It's about getting help. It gives you suggestions for how to post a good notice, how to post a reasonable notice. And then here's a list of notice boards. So big problems, there's an admin's notice board, incidents notice board, edit warning, vandalism, if you have somebody posting a lot of nonsense into an article and you want some help with that. Bureaucrats, you're unlikely to have need for bureaucrats or arbitration. But the OTRS notice board might be of interest if you have an article, if you have an image and you're trying to figure out how to get permission to use it, or how to document the fact that you got permission to use it from the copyright owner. And scroll down, there are lots of others. There's also a category of notice boards. So this is category Wikipedia notice boards. These are both places where you may be looking for help. Also, sometimes if somebody tags your page, there may be a link in that tag which can point you in a useful direction. OTRS, okay. OTRS is, it's a good question. I'm not sure what it stands for. So OTRS is the Volunteer Response Team, open source ticket response system. Now, so it's one of these acronyms that you learn to use and you don't really know what they are sometimes. So here it is. If you want to verify permissions, if you want to get help, so there's explanations here for how you do it. The most common place you're likely to use this is for media permissions. So you'll probably use the version on Wikimedia Commons in that case. But let's say you're writing an article about somebody, you know, maybe an archive that has a picture of that person, and the archive or whoever is the owner of the picture sends you an email saying, sure, I'm willing to release this under a free license. And if you simply take their word for it and post a note on Commons when you upload it saying, yeah, I got permission from the copyright owner, it's quite possible that it's reasonable for nobody to believe you. So what OTRS does is it allows the actual copyright owner to email a certain address, a certain team, and they will archive that permission, and then they will go and say, yes, we received permission and it's, everything's above board. Not a good sign. There's a long backlog here. There's always a need for volunteers. So this feeds into then the third thing I want to talk about, and that is media. So most of the questions I get as a content expert are about media use, image use on Wikipedia. What's acceptable, what's not acceptable, why is the image that I just uploaded being tagged for deletion? I found this image online, can I use it? These kinds of questions. So content on Wikipedia is supposed to be available under a free license. This free license means free to be reused, not just for non-commercial reasons, but free to be reused for commercial uses as well. Free to be remixed in various ways and used to produce derivative work, all kinds of things like that. So if you want to illustrate your article, the first place to look is Wikimedia Commons. Commons has a vast repository of usable material. It should be usable. It should be released under an appropriate free license. But very often, the stuff you want isn't there. So you might need to go hunting beyond that. You can do a Google search that actually specifically looks for Creative Commons licensed images. You can search Flickr for tags like that. The problem is that not every Creative Commons licensed image is reusable on Wikipedia. So sometimes things are licensed as non-commercial. They'll have the NC in their license, or they'll have an image with a $sign with a line through it. Anything like that can be reused for non-commercial purposes, but for Wikipedia, that's not a free enough license. Now, obviously, it's perfectly reasonable for somebody not to want their material to be reused commercially. You made a picture, you're happy to let somebody use it for not for profit, but if it's for profit use, you're not okay with that. You don't want somebody making money off of your work. Unfortunately, Wikipedia's goals are about maximum reusability. So anything that's non-commercial, we can't use. Anything that doesn't allow derivative work, similarly, can't be used directly on Wikipedia. So you want a Creative Commons share alike, or SA license. That's good. Or a GFDL, GNU free. Whatever GFDL stands for. That's another license that's used much more for software, but some images are licensed that way. Wikipedia was originally licensed that way, but it's a slightly more cumbersome way of redistributing things. So second case of what's usable is things where the copyright has expired. Copyright traditionally is something that's extended for a fixed term. US copyright has been anything before, I believe, 1923. Copyrights have expired, but anything after 1923, it's been extended for a few years, every few years. A lot of people blame that on Mickey Mouse, that it's a way to keep Mickey Mouse from going into the public domain. It's a way to keep Mickey Mouse under copyright. regardless of the rationale behind it, newer material isn't going into copyrights on newer material aren't being allowed to expire in the US. In other countries, they are. So copyright expiration differs from country to country. It's been significantly revised over the last 40 years. So if you find something that's old, say less than 100 years old, that was published in the last 100 years, it's best to ask. There's, we'll get to in a moment, there's some good places to ask on Wikipedia. Is this image likely to be, is this okay, or is it likely to still be under copyright? Things like that. Now, US government documents and things produced by the US government are not subject to copyright, so they are automatically released into the public domain. Now, in a copyright context, public domain does not mean publicly available, like people often use it. It specifically means no longer subject to copyright or not subject to copyright. So the US federal government, when it does something, it releases it into the public domain. Any US federal government employee doing something as part of their normal duties, this should apply. If they're doing it on their own time, that's different. State governments have their own mix of regulations. Other governments have regulations of their own. It all gets pretty complicated. But US government material is often a good place to look for usable stuff as well. But you still have to be careful, because you may have a publication by the US federal government that includes a photograph that is subject to copyright because it wasn't produced by government as by a government employee. So what about fair use? If you've looked around Wikipedia, you'll find things that are not freely licensed, but that are used in articles. You'll often find book covers, you'll find album covers, you'll find pictures of people, older pictures of people, historical photographs, and they are used under fair use. So fair use is, in the US, it's a permitted infringement of copyright for certain specific uses. Commentary, scholarly use, teaching, these kinds of things. Now, if you use material that's non-free, first thing is you can't upload it to Commons. It has to be hosted on Wikipedia itself. Makes things a little more complicated. But the other thing is you have to meet what's called the non-free content criteria. So the policy is outlined here, and there are a number of steps. There's no freely available equivalent. You can't be infringing somebody's ability to, say, sell their photographs. You should make sure it's minimal use. Upload a low quality image. And there's a list of different criteria here that you should, it's got to be non-replaceable. So if you use if it's for a living person, generally pictures of that person are not acceptable to be used as fair use, because at least in theory somebody could take another picture of them. For a person who's no longer alive, there's automatically at least the beginning of a rationale to use an image of them if if nothing free is available. So it's important if you're using non-free content to use it in drafts. Sorry, not to use it in drafts. So only use it in main space. Don't use it on your user page. If you have a draft that you've decided that you want to make a fair use argument for using this image on, wait till you move the draft into main space, then upload the fair use, upload it to Wikipedia, not to Commons, and make sure you include a detailed rationale. And again, if you have questions, there's a notice board for that. Go to the Media Copyright Questions board. Anything about media, there are lots of people there, very often, who are quite friendly and helpful and interested in answering your questions. Okay, so that's what I have to talk about. And does anybody have questions? Anybody have anything they want to bring up? The Q&A, I can see the Q&A. If you want to type a question into there, there's a short lag, but please do. And again, I apologize for our technical difficulties. Okay, well, hopefully nobody has questions that they're in the middle of typing and I haven't gotten yet. So I think I'll wrap up here. Thank you very much for coming. My apologies for our technical challenges, and feel free to email Helene or me about any questions that come up. If you're watching this later on, again, don't hesitate to send us emails with questions. And hope you have a good week. Happy editing. Bye.